I've said very, very clearly, I think that Boris Johnson isn't going to be going at least this side of Christmas. It's probably going to be in the new year at some point. But there are two key individuals that you have to keep an eye on. The first one is Liz Truss. And as I keep on telling people, she is easily the most popular member among the non-Conservative Party as well as the Conservative Party MPs currently. She is the most popular by a country mile. Now, will that change, obviously, with her, should we say, recent negotiation skills? Essentially, now continuing the Lord Frost threat to trigger Article 16. So far, she's done it once. Like I say, I intend to keep a counter this time to see how many times Liz Truss will indeed threaten to trigger Article 16, but then not do it. Because, again, this is just an empty threat. The UK does not win in a trade war against the EU. It just simply doesn't. There is no way it can win. The next player in this, of course, is Rishi Sunak. And we're going to go over some of what he's been up to quite recently, because he probably has more power to, shall we say, undermine Boris even more than Liz Truss does. Liz Truss at the moment is currently on a marketing campaign that hasn't actually yet turned into a solid proposal for leadership. Rishi Sunak, on the other hand, is he's the chancellor, and he can very easily lay out a way to go by saying, well, all these Boris promises didn't work because, well, he didn't fund them. Here's what I want to do instead if only I were PM. And so we now get to see possibly what is Rishi Sunak's basic blatant act of treachery against Boris Johnson. And these are indeed probably the first early moves we are going to see of at least a minister trying to, shall we say, remove his boss from the top of the pole to climb to the top themselves. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, there are the YouTube membership links open as well down below. And as always, thank you everyone who does support the channel that way, even if you do just hit the like and share buttons. So, on with The Guardian. So, the title is, in a brazen act of treachery, Rishi Sunak is sabotaging Boris Johnson's policies. There's probably never a good time for a Chancellor of the Exchequer to visit California. But doing so when the whole business sectors are literally on the verge of collapse was particularly a very bad look. Yesterday, Rishi Sunak announced a bailout package worth around £1 billion for businesses losing trade because of Omicron. But Labour's understandably accused the Chancellor of being missing in action at the crucial moments. The charge sheet, however, is actually much more serious than that. The Chancellor might have been invisible over the recent weeks, but his fingerprints are all over the government's policy problems. So why has the government been so reluctant to issue official guidance that would limit public socialising, as Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer for England, has recommended? Because to do so would effectively mean the government was indeed forcing the closure of the hospitality sector, and in turn, that would require the Treasury to reinstitute the furlough scheme, the most economically sensible response to the current crisis, but a short-term hit to the public finances that Sunak is desperate to avoid. And why did the government's railway plans for the north as well? The centerpiece of Johnson's levelling up strategy received such a raspberry from businesses and local authorities there because Sunak had cut the investment funding available, forcing the complete abandonment of the part of the HS2 and the critical Trans-Pennine route. So why was the government's net zero strategy delayed for at least 6 months? When they finally published and criticised by both the environmental and business groups, because the Chancellor had refused to provide the levels of public investment needed to achieve the strategy's emissions cutting objectives. Independent estimates put the sums required at least 4 times of the 30 billion he allowed. And of course, why was the government's social care plan lambasted by almost everyone, from the Independent King's Fund to the Tory chair of Health and the Social Care Select Committee. Yes, you guessed it, because Sunak had seriously underfunded it. His promissory even exceeding to the very recalculating the household cap on costs on care in a way that will leave many poorer households at risk of being forced to sell their homes, which was precisely what Boris Johnson had promised would not happen. Each of these now underfunding decisions arises from the very same source, the Chancellor's new fiscal rules. One of these, relatively uncontroversial, is that in normal times, government should only borrow for investment, with the day-to-day spending covered by taxes. But the other two have very powerful effects. Sunak has insisted that the total level of government debt should be on a downward path within 3 years, and he has placed a cap on annual public investment by at least 3% of the GDP. By adopting these rules, Sunak is placing a very tight limit on public spending. This was disguised in last month's budget because the spurn of economic growth in the autumn had given him more revenues than anticipated, allowing him to give more money at almost every government department. But as with each subsequent policy announcement has shown, his largesse is much less than required by the Prime Minister's policy and political objectives, of course. Gordon Brown introduced the idea of the fiscal rules back in 1997 to reassure the city that he would be prudent with public finances. If the Treasury must follow preordained rules, the Chancellor cannot manipulate the economy for political benefit, such as stroking the consumer boom before an election. But rules are only there to be useful if they remain fixed. In practice, every Chancellor from Brown himself onward has adjusted the rules to allow them to adopt the fiscal stage for their preference. Sunak's, of course, are the fifth set of announcement in the last 6 years. So no one should let Sunak claim that the fiscal rules means that his hands are tied. He simply just cannot spend more. The Chancellor has pulled the rope very tightly around the wrists himself. But these present rules these present rules at least do make economic sense. Even though self-imposed, they constitute a very rational fiscal constraint. No, Sunak's rules are particularly illiterate from an economic point of view. So there is no economic justification for saying that 2024 must be the moment when the public debt starts to fall. If that is true, about 95% of the national income, the UK's debt is much higher than it used to be. But what makes the debt unsustainable is not its absolute level, but how much it costs the government in interest payments. And these are crucially at their second lowest level, because interest rates have been low for so long, since the 1950s. This makes Sunak's 3% cap on public investment quite extraordinary. The UK economy is crying out for investment in building homes, insulating homes, renewable energy, railways, broadband, childcare, social care, schools, nature conservation, business innovation, product innovativity, to just a few key areas named. But in the past, much of this would have been done by the private sector. But in today's financialized economy, where banks put more money into land and property than into productive businesses, and companies prefer paying dividends to investing for the long term, there is a critical role for the public sector to invest instead. And given that it can now borrow highly at a negative real interest rates, that is, once inflation is taken into account, it would indeed be absurd not to. In these circumstances, putting an arbitrary cap on public investment is exactly the opposite of what is required. So why is Sunak doing this? He gave the game away earlier this month with a careful leak into the Times that he intends to cut income tax before the next election, due to be in 2024. He will only have room to do this if public spending, however vulnerable, has to be tightened to rein it in. You don't need to be a political genius to see that Sunak is positioning himself for the next Conservative Party leadership election as the tax-cutting, small state heir to Margaret Thatcher, so fervently longed for by many of the party's MPs and members. Everyone in Westminster can see this. And on Tuesday, the very astute Westminster Watchers, a website, Politico, acknowledged his very ambitions with the label King Rishi. But what makes it so astonishing is the collateral damage has gone largely unremarked upon. Sunak has effectively undermining every one of Johnson's policy priorities. Such is a brazen act of political treachery as in modern times we have ever seen. So this is really, I think, the first lot of opening salvos around this. Sunak is gunning for Boris's job, and if he can already show, hey guys, this is what I am. This is what you want me to be. The low, the small state cutting taxes, Margaret Thatcher heir that you wanted. I can be that. That is what he's selling to the current MPs. Whereas Liz Truss is on a marketing campaign saying, oh, look, wouldn't I be a good PM? Whereas at the moment she's got nothing to offer. Sunak, on the other hand, has not only the marketing campaign of, oh, wasn't he a good chancellor during all this pandemic crisis? And look at all the stuff that he's doing at the moment. Wouldn't he be a good PM? Yeah, I said it before earlier this week, and I will keep on saying it again. The two people you have to watch are Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. And the fact that Rishi Sunak is doing this for his own political personal benefit, even though it is, again, under Boris Johnson, is, as it was said at the air, one of the most brazen acts of political treachery in the modern political age. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And you can also support the channel with a YouTube subscription as well, if you would like. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And thank you to all the people who do support the channel. And we'll see you all next time.